In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert, yet again, podcasting.
Here we are.
In the sweltering heat.
Oh my gosh, it's so hot.
It's a regular old heat wave.
It's those like 3 to 5 days of hot in LA. And as many of you have heard us say before, or maybe we've never said it before, maybe this is the first time ever, but we don't have air conditioning or heat in our house because really the temperatures don't fluctuate enough to really warrant it here at the beach. So during those few cold days of the year and those few hot days of the year, we just suffer through it.
And complain about it on the podcast.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's our thing to do.
Yeah. So, but it's really not that bad. And actually the positive side is, at least for the warm days, I went and had an awesome swim in the ocean today and it was delightful.
Yep. Yeah, we both beached it today, which was cool.
Separately, though.
Yeah. I went for a run on the beach this morning, which was nice.
Yes, and I had a nice walk with Virginia, one of our mentors. Virginia Reese is out visiting, so we got to do a little beach walk this morning. Some bees in the wild kind of stuff.
Yeah. Doing it. So we've got an awesome guest today, and I'm super excited to get to him. But before we do, we just want to talk a little bit about what we've got going on. As many of you have heard, we have the last couple of weeks had some really interesting guests that have pretty much focused around plant medicine and some of the therapeutic usages and all that good stuff. And we are, in fact, doing a retreat with Rhythmia, or we'll be in attendance for a week down there, November 11th through 18th. And they have opened that up for us to include bees or anyone who wants to come and join us. So if you're interested in that, there is officially a week, the 11th through the 18th of November. Yeah. That's happening. And you can either check out the link in the bio here in the show notes. We'll be sending out an email to our email listeners or to our email list so folks can look for it there. But if for some reason you don't get it through any of that, you don't get the information through any of those avenues, you can always call them, email them, let them know you'd like to come down and join our group, and just make sure you let them know you're with us, and they'll put you in our group. Yeah. Super cool. And so this is in Costa Rica. Yeah. And Costa Rica in November is spectacular. Yes. So, well, and do it. Real quick story, which some of you might have read in the email that went out. But the interesting thing about the timing of all of this, and you just can't help but really be keenly aware of the synchronicity that comes along with this kind of work. And typically we have our own retreat every year in Costa Rica. And because we'd switched locations this year, the way it happened, we didn't end up having our new location for 2018. So we were like, I guess we're not having a retreat in Costa Rica this year. It's kind of funny. And literally the week that we're going to be at Rhythmia would have been the week we booked. Right. So it was just pretty interesting that clearly there was something larger at play there. And, Adam and I have been interested in sharing this work for a long time. We're not shaman. We're not, not trying to do that, do all that. But we do really believe in the power of the work, and we'll be doing it. And if you want to come join us and be a part of that, then we welcome you, and we would love to share that experience. Yeah, seems cool. And Costa Rica just can't get by without us for a year. I guess not. Apparently what's going on. So we definitely have some karmic ties for sure. Something, man. These countries in Central and South America, they've got our number. Yeah, exactly. So if you guys have any questions about that, you can also email me at info@bethewellness.com. I'm happy to lend any support, advice, all that good stuff. Information, yes. Happy faces and exclamations mostly. Yeah, mostly exclamations. Yeah. So let's get to our awesome guest because, I really enjoyed this podcast, and I basically feel like this guy might be the male version of me.
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't met in person, but we're going to.
Yeah.
But he was introduced to us through Elle from the Primal Blueprint podcast. And Elle reached out and said, you've got to have this guy on the podcast. He's so happy. He's so lovely. He's just a delightful human being. I know you're going to love him. And that was definitely the case. And his name is Rob Mack. And he is actually a happiness coach.
Right.
Like, that's his official title.
Which is a deal, yeah.
Yeah, which I was like, wait a minute. Nobody told me you could have that title.
Yeah.
So, but he teaches people about how to have happier lives. And, you know, he's worked with all kinds of people, Oprah and Vanessa Williams and all kinds of cool people. And you can look at his website and learn more about him. He's on a television show called Famously Single on E, and he's a celebrity love coach on that. So he's just, you know, he's got a morning show called Good Morning LaLa Land, which we are going to go join him on. That's a streaming live show that he does in Hollywood. So lots of cool stuff going on. And when this episode comes out, you can go over and check it out. Maybe our episode will be up.
Yeah.
And you can see us live in color with Rob Mack. So that will be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
And without further ado, here's Rob. And we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's so exciting. You know, we got connected to you through Elle Russ from the Primal Blueprint. And pretty much anytime Elle throws us a recommendation, I'm like, done. You're in. Because she has a way.
She is the best.
She's the best, right? And she just connects people and is just such a lovely being. And so anytime she, you know, throws somebody our way, we're always like, oh, we can't wait to meet them.
She's awesome. I love Elle. It's amazing. She's like such a super connector. It's like she knows everyone.
She really is. Yeah. And she's just a bright light. So, so yeah, we're excited to get connected. And before we, you know, kind of get off and running here, we'd love to just take a moment for you to just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your history, your background, and kind of get us up to speed with who Rob is.
All right. Well, excellent. So I am a positive psychology practitioner. So positive psychology is the science of what makes life worth living. It's an Ivy League master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's really about how happiness can help us live more successful lives. And so it's a lot about sort of what leads to happiness and what leads to success. So love that. I also work sort of as an executive coach and a peak performance coach. All of that basically means that I take positive psychology and I help people apply it to their daily lives and to both their personal and professional lives so that they can live happier, healthier, wealthier lives from the inside out. So written a book, Happiness from the Inside Out, basically captures a little bit of what I talk to my clients about. I do a morning show called Good Morning LaLa Land. It's all about positivity and happiness, but I'm basically like the happiness guy. I just love people being happy. And that's basically my deal.
That's awesome.
Well, it definitely comes through. Like it's permeating this side of the Zoom call for sure.
I hope it's not too much. It can be a little much at times, but
I don't know. Man. I don't know if you can have too much.
He lives with me too, so he's pretty used to. Honestly, this I feel like I might have like a split spirit out there somewhere, and I'm like, yeah, sing it.
Well, good. I'm in good company then.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So, so what I think is kind of interesting about what you've got going on is that, you know, because we talk to a lot of coaches and, you know, various people who, whether they consider themselves coaches or not, at the end of the day, if you're helping folks, you're probably coaching them to some degree. And, you know, it's usually somewhere in the fitness space or in the nutrition piece of what's going on. But if what I'm understanding you're saying is correct, you can kind of cover all the bases because you're just sort of at a little bit higher level, right? You're getting up into the, like, what makes you tick piece, and that could apply to pretty much anything, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, the way I think about it too is, look, we want to do everything we can to live a happy or to live a healthy life, especially. And that being said, we do know from science, and I know from personal experience, that being healthy doesn't necessarily lead to, you know, happiness. Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, being happy does improve your health. So the way I like to think about things, I'm kind of lazy. And so I like to reduce everything to the most simple, right? Like it's the most simple possible explanation or approach that I can. So from my experience and, from lots of the research and everything that I've done, discovered that really at the core of everything, at the core of sort of why we want to be alive, our point and purpose for life, and the reason, for being alive at all, and also the end goal of all the things that we do, the things that we want to achieve or acquire in life. The whole reason we want to be healthy is so that we can be, to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I discovered that happiness leads to all these other positive things in our life, and that it's also the reason for all these other positive things in our life, I was like, you know what? I think that's my thing. I just want to be happy. I think everybody else wants to be happy. And if it also means being healthy, because being happy basically, helps to improve your immune system. It, by decreasing or reducing stress and anxiety, it, reduces inflammation in your body. And so all these great things I discovered about happiness leading to health just made me more and more excited about this sort of pursuit of happiness, so to speak.
I feel like basically I want to be a happiness coach too now.
Yeah, right?
This is pretty much.
I think that you are.
I think I am, yeah. But I love this because I always say
you definitely seem like it, yeah.
Yeah, you're feeling it, right?
I am.
I was, I say this a lot to folks because I think I don't know what the right term is, like a war on happiness, a plague on happiness. I don't know what it is, but it seems like there's so much wrapped up in, like, are we allowed to be happy? Like, am I allowed to do things that make me happy, or should I be spending every moment of my day doing things that are productive and, might make me more money or might make me look better and blah, blah, blah. And it's like people actually have a really hard time giving themselves permission to be happy. And I noticed on your website that you said happiness is a choice. And this is actually, I teach a course called Authentic Self, and there's a whole week on joy. And it's all about this. It's about this fact that you have to choose this. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about your philosophy around that and how you help people to understand how it is to choose being happy.
Wow. Great. First of all, great week. I love that week that you have dedicated to joy and being your authentic self. Just huge. So I'll give you a little quick background on my own personal journey. And I think we might be able to sort of highlight a couple of things that worked for me in terms of choosing happiness. So I grew up in an incredible family. I did well academically. I did well athletically, but I was really unhappy kid, really unhappy, strangely unhappy. So over the years, that happiness just got worse and worse. And I was focused my whole life as a child and then as an adult on being productive, on being successful, and doing things the way people had always told me to do things, no matter what it was, whether it was, interacting with people, whether it was schoolwork, whether it was getting a job, whether it was athletics. I did things by the book. And with this hope that I would be successful and accomplished and therefore happy. And I started noticing I was achieving some things. I went to a great school and I had a great girlfriend, and I went up to work in the management consulting world for a while, and I was absolutely more miserable at that point than I was in my entire life when I had, sort of the most success, at least at that young age. Mm-hmm. So at some point I discovered that I didn't realize it, but I was day in and day out, moment by moment, making a choice against happiness. I would literally say, I didn't realize I was doing this, but say, okay, do I want to do this thing that I really hate that is making my life absolutely miserable, that everybody says I should do because it means I'm being productive or whatnot? Or do I want to do this other thing, like go to the beach? And I was consistently choosing that thing that I knew was going to make me miserable, but that was, socially approved. Mm-hmm. And so at some point I became suicidal, honestly, when I started thinking about life and the way in which we were all living life and the way in which I was living life. And I still had a test marks on my arm because I'd gotten to the point and I'd done the research, and I was basically like, this is the way I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to get a razor blade or a steak knife, and I'm just going to, slash into my wrist. And I had a really interesting experience at that point because, I was done. And when I began to dig the knife in and think, this is going to be the end of all my problems. I was coming to a realization, this is the end, not only my problems, but in my life. I felt such bliss. I felt more peace and more bliss in the contemplation of my own death than I had ever in my life. And it was inexplicable in some ways, and later I realized, that I had been focusing really and choosing really against my own happiness. And from that day forward, I didn't put off suicide, but I didn't I did postpone it and say, well, that's always an option. Got that in my back pocket, as morbid as that sounds. And so I said, I'll put off for an hour or a day. And then a day slipped into a week, and a week slipped into a couple months and whatnot. But the whole time at that point, I'd chosen to at least research, happy people, happy studies, and try to discover what the secret of happiness was. But it was a choice that got the whole ball rolling. Prior to that, I was really just focused on productivity and success. And I believe that you can have both. In fact, I think that happiness leads to much more or better.
Totally agree. Sorry, we might have lost you for a second. Are we good with sound, Adam?
That's okay.
Oh, there we go.
We got you loud and clear.
Okay.
So I'm curious because it's a super interesting. Interesting seems like almost too light of a word to talk about, like contemplated suicide.
Right.
but it's interesting.
But it is interesting.
Yeah. And so what I'm wondering is, like, what do you think was actually the impetus, or what was the decision point, or how did you sort of have this aha to take the moment and pause long enough to take? Because I mean, that's a fairly introspective thought that you had, like in that moment of, look, I'm gonna end my own life, and wow, this would make me so happy, to switch that to, maybe I've been making decisions, throughout my whole life that have been just choosing the unhappy thing. Like that's like a pretty deep and insightful thought to just have. So I'm curious if, like, have you pondered that at all? Was that just like a blip that showed up, or what do you think about that?
What a great question. So I would say the realization came over time. It built upon itself over time. So it was little things here and there. I mean, I was always a very strange child, like extremely introverted, and I would just observe people. I mean, I don't think I really spoke much until about 13 or 14. And then even then didn't say much. I mostly watched people and observed, and really just was in my head a lot because I was so insecure and so uncomfortable with myself. So I think in a strange way, that set me up for insights that would come later, right? And even when I was going through that period, at 11 or 12, I remember reading books on psychology. I remember reading, Psycho-Cybernetics was one of the first books I remember reading. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at the time, but I was aware that, like, I had something felt, improperly wired in my brain. Like, it just didn't, and so I think that was part of the process. That introversion began to sort of unfold in increasingly productive ways over time. The other thing is, I was always really interested in, like, other religions and spiritual traditions. And I was always interested in, like, why, this person over here was happy and that person over there wasn't happy, or this person made a ton of money and that person didn't. So I was sort of like a student of people and student of life, just because I was so unhappy and always felt like I didn't have any of the answers. So I think just over time, those things began to build on themselves and the dots started to connect. But if I were to give you one answer about that, I could really only describe it as divine intervention. I mean, I can't say that I was smart enough or prepared enough or resilient enough to make a decision for happiness or to make a decision to live. It was mostly just a series of insights and events and people and conversations that added up over time and eventually allowed me to see things differently.
Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned something in here that I want to kind of key in on a little bit more, and that's just it's resilience, which is a word that, it gets thrown around quite a bit. But in my previous career, I spent a couple decades as a fireman, and so resiliency is like this thing, right? I mean, everybody's sleep deprived; they're just shot. Like every coping mechanism, and you can't drink when you're on duty, so it's like every possible coping has been sort of stripped away. And so it is really this thing that, you have to be incredibly resilient. And I'm curious to hear how this choice, well, I'll let you talk about it. How does resilience and happiness sort of interplay?
Through optimism. So it's something else I discovered. So I discovered that, optimism, the scientific study of optimism, is really about how do we explain bad things that happen and good things that happen. Do we explain the bad things that happen in personal ways, like, oh, it's my fault, essentially, Do we describe it in persistent ways? Is it going to, persist through time? And is it going to be prevalent? Does it also persist through different circumstances and situations? The easy way of saying that is, it's just the way you look at things. And so the most resilient people, okay, they are able to see good events in ways that are personal, that there's something within them they see as strength. They see them as persistent, so it's going to persist through time, that strength and that ability they have. And it's going to be prevalent. It's going to be something that exists through different kinds of circumstances and conditions. Whereas pessimistic people see sort of the reverse of that. And so optimism, if you want to be resilient, the most resilient people are basically able to see the good within themselves and see the good within either the world or other people, but they're able to see life in a way that lets them keep going, that lets them persist, right? Yeah. And so we can all build that gift. We can all build that strength of resilience. And so it's really just about this explanatory style that we call optimism in science, but it's really about seeing the best in yourself and the best in the world.
That really resonates with me, because when I think about what you just mentioned, pessimistic people, well, actually you said optimistic people see the joy inside of themselves and can therefore project that out, where if you were to suggest the opposite, it would mean that pessimistic people do not see the joy inside of themselves. And so I've always noticed that I do believe that your self-worth and sort of the value that you hold yourself at allows you to project those thoughts into the world. And so I'm curious, for the pessimistic person out there, what's some advice or like a couple of things that you could help them to start cultivating that joy and that more optimistic approach?
Wow, great question. You see, this is why you guys are just phenomenal at what you do. My gosh, you have the voices for it, you have sort of the intellect and the personalities. So
thanks.
It's a great question. So yeah, it's absolutely true. So, how would I put it? Well, let me share this with you as sort of a lead into that, to the answer to that question. So what we discovered, so senior year in college, before I went on to graduate school, I was studying something called the illusion of control. And the illusion of control is basically found that happy people or optimistic people, okay, are actually, well, let me put it the other way. Depressed people and pessimistic people are actually much wiser, but they're sadder. So meaning that depressed people and pessimistic people actually evaluate or rate their degree of control over any situation in the world accurately, okay? And that, but because of that, they're much sadder, okay? And that also means, though, they have less influence going forward. So actually happy people, and that's most people are reasonably happy, they actually overestimate how much control they have over the world, over any particular situation. They're a little delusional. If you're happy, you're a little delusional, okay? It's mind-blowing. It's like, yeah, yes. So, happy people generally think that they're better than average drivers, they're better than average basketball players, they're better than average writers. Like, we all have that. And it's a quite necessary and helpful sort of survival mechanism for this world. But interestingly enough, it's precisely that degree, that sort of overestimation of the control that you can exert on the world that allows you to succeed in almost every area of life where the pessimists don't. So optimists, they experience better health. They actually do better financially. They have better relationships. And so always optimism, in fact, based on optimism, we've been able to predict presidential elections. We've been able to predict the outcomes of group and team and individual sports events. So really, just by looking at optimism, you can often predict all kinds of interesting things in the world, right? And so if you're wanting to cultivate that skill of optimism, it's very simple. You have to begin practicing, okay, looking for the best in everything and everybody, and to make it a habit. And in the beginning, it takes effort, but over time, like everything, it becomes increasingly effortless. And you eventually get to a place where it's automatic. And so for me, it's mostly automatic. And because I've been practicing, it took like 2 decades, but it's eventually, and that doesn't mean I don't have hard days, but of course you do. But generally my default now is to see the best in other people, to see the best in myself. But I started it's not a snow job. In the beginning, you start by simply looking for the things that you do enjoy, or looking for the things that you do feel authentically appreciative about within yourself, within other people. and within life itself. You always want to base it on truth. And then over time, you just stretch a little bit more and you say, this is a very uncomfortable situation I'm in, or this person is really unlikable. But what is the one redeeming quality in this circumstance or within this person or within this job that I have one thing? And you can sort of consistently become the increasingly selective sifter of your experiences so that you're always intentionally looking for the best.
I love that. You're like a human colander.
Yes, you are a human colander. That's right. That's great.
I love that.
Totally.
I think that, like, we talk about in our wellness company, we talk about mastery, life mastery. And, obviously that word can have a lot of different connotations. But when you talk about, the person who is more pessimistic, being actually a little bit more in touch with the fact that they have little to no control over their surroundings and environment, I think that if you can take that one level further and you can actually say, okay, I know that, but I dance in the face of that. Like, that becomes where you actually grab another gear and become even more supremely intelligent in your human experience, because you do recognize that, yet you decide to still dance in the face of it and take it on as like, just another color on the palette, so to speak.
Oh, preach. Like, honestly, that is like, I'm telling you, like, so this is what's beautiful about this, because this is why I call happiness an art and a science. Okay. Science generally studies averages. Okay. And they say, what's average? Average is having one arm plunged into a fire and the other arm plunged into ice and then calling yourself room temperature, right? That's the running joke. It's like, well, you're dead, like, or whatever. Like, it's a very uncomfortable experience. And so average is overrated. And so what science doesn't tend to do very well or very often is study the folks that are outliers, right? So the Buddhas of the world, the Jesus of the world, the Lao Tzus of the world, the Oprahs of the world, the Bill Gates. It doesn't study those people. And so without question, we have very little control, even over our own minds. We have very little control, even in the present moment, let alone over somebody else's mind or actions or words, let alone over the entire world. There's very little control you actually have. And so, but there's incredible power and security and stability and happiness and joy and peace and love in that recognition. If you can recognize that in a deep, authentic way, you do discover greater happiness. And that's 100% true. Like, I discovered, like, positive psychology was allowed me to get to a certain point. But then I hit this bridge where I was like, well, if depressed people are actually more accurate in their estimations of control, okay, don't I want to be both accurate and it would be, ideally I'd be both accurate and happy. And I discovered absolutely, without question, I mean, those, whether you talk to folks that are, whether you talk to monks, whether you talk to lifelong meditators, whether you talk to people that just have an incredible spiritual practice, or people that just have a recognition from a philosophical perspective of how little control they have, and you can see that they've truly digested it and they allow for it and they've surrendered to it, there's no higher bliss or joy in the world, I think, than that. Mm-hmm. So you just nailed it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a piece of this too. I'm sure you're probably familiar with Robert Sapolsky from Stanford, the primatologist up there. So his book, Why Zebras Don't Have Ulcers or Don't Get Ulcers, I think that changed a lot for me with regard to just understanding, what this whole stress piece is about and the stress response and just kind of how our bodies react to all these various inputs around us. And one of the things that I kind of always took from one of the chapters in the book, he said that the sort of most stressful scenario, like the worst case scenario for a primate, humans included, is to be sort of low on the food chain where you have less control. So to know that there's something coming that's dangerous, but you don't know what it is. And when it gets there, you're not going to be the one that's capable of dealing with it. And just like stew in that, like guess what? This is what your life looks like as sort of a low order baboon.
Yes.
In this whole tree of things. And so I'm wondering, like, from that perspective, this concept of the unknown and what we were just talking about, where you're saying that the people who really fully grasp just how little control they have. So do you think that acceptance of that allows for some freedom in that sort of primate response. Is that more or less what you're driving at?
Yeah, I love that. So if boy, that's a great question. And it's a deep question. I would say that the way I would say it is, at the end of the day, happiness is a quiet mind. I would say it's no mind. It doesn't mean that you don't think when you need to, but that you recognize you recognize that you very rarely need to, like right. And that we are obsessive compulsive thinkers. At the end of the day, my happiest moments, the most blissful, peaceful, and most loving moments always occur when my mind is completely quiet and I'm just present. And that presence itself is happiness, okay? All of the stress and anxiety in my life has come when I've been reflecting on the past, or I've been trying to forecast or predict or control the future, okay? And I've been ruminating. That's really where stress and anxiety goes. And so that's why I think someone is, like Byron Katie says, the worst thing that can happen to you on your deathbed is only a belief. Really, the worst thing that can happen to you in life is really a thought or a belief. That doesn't mean that physical things can't happen in need, but in terms of real suffering, the psychological, emotional suffering that we call misery or unhappiness or stress or anxiety, those are simply thoughts, right? So if you're in actual danger, it's an emergency, you'll run, or you'll call an ambulance, or you'll do whatever's necessary to resolve that situation if it's an actual emergency. But the kind of thinking that we do most consistently that causes us the most pain and suffering in this world is simply that obsessive compulsive analyzing, worrying, regretting, forecasting, predicting, all that nonsense is what causes most of the world to not only be unhappy, but as a result of that to be unloving, right? And so I would say that, yes, without question, experiences the same misfortune and illness and death that we experience, but they don't make a problem of it, right? We make a problem of it. Only human beings have made a problem of their own existence. The rest of nature, perfectly blissful as far as we know, right? And so when you think about that, you realize that this prefrontal cortex is both a gift and it's a bit of a curse as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had Loretta Bruning on, it's been about a year now, and she talked very similar about this, how to basically retrain your brain to be happy because, after so many years of sort of burning these neural pathways into your brain, this constant rumination and these constant default settings to stress and all of the stuff just really changes your brain. So I'm curious about that piece from your perspective. What do you, or if you, I guess the point I'm trying to say is, what do you tell your clients to actually start to retrain their brain?
So great question. I would say that first and foremost, the highest teaching I can offer anyone is my own embodied presence or happiness. So my first level, I'm trying to embody or be and model exactly what I want them to do. And I'm trying to do it as consistently as I can throughout that session or conversation. Right. And I do that for me first and foremost because it's selfish and it feels good. Okay. Yeah. But I also realize that more powerful than anything I could possibly say or tell them is what I am being. They can feel that, and I'm not going to always get the words right. I've learned that. So if I can be that, that's the most powerful teaching ever. And I can most powerfully be that in silence. But people often need words. And so what I then will tell people is to, as often as they can throughout the day, to let their thoughts go and simply enjoy one breath with the only goal of enjoying that breath. So try to basically have as many moments you can where you more deeply enjoy the moments for themselves without letting the thoughts get in the way. I call those micro meditations. But that's one of the greatest exercises or sort of tips or tricks that I offer people is just, if you can become increasingly present and practice in every moment of the day. So when you're having a conversation, when you're taking a shower, when you're walking to the car, when you're ordering food, if you can just simply take one breath where you let the thoughts go and you simply enjoy that breath as though it's the last breath you'll ever take on earth. Really try to enjoy it. It's a great first step to eventually recognizing or realizing that who you essentially are is just the awareness. You're just awareness. The thoughts happen, but you don't have to be consumed by the thoughts. You don't have to believe the thoughts. You don't have to do anything about the thoughts. But you can just notice that there's something that exists behind or above or beyond that thinking and that feeling and the worrying and the obsessive compulsive, analyzing. If you just feel that, your own presence and that your own awareness in moments, here and there, but just do it for a micro moment. If you try to do it for too long, it becomes a big to-do item and it feels like a chore. Next thing you know, you're not doing it anymore because it feels like one more thing. But I would say that is probably one of the most important things, is just notice that you already have moments when your mind is quiet. Try to enjoy them more.
Well, I can absolutely see why Elle recommended we talk, because this conversation is literally feeding my soul. And I couldn't just this is the thing that, I think so many of us try to overcomplicate it, right? We try to make it this big, okay, on Monday, I'm going to start this big plan to then, drink more water, work out, go for a walk, do my meditation. And we stack all these things on top of each other. And we forget just to appreciate the small moments, just the single breath. And I think that's just so profound. And I hope that resonates with people, because it doesn't have to be complicated.
It's everything. I love what Einstein said. He said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. And I think I'm always working towards that end. It's just so simple. At the end of the day, it's simply too much thinking that leads to unhappiness. Without the thinking, you're happy already. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I remember growing up, my dad would always joke, and he would always say, every time we pass a cemetery, he'd say, how many people in that cemetery you think are dead? Or how many dead people you think are in that cemetery? And I'd be like, and he'd always say, I don't know, 1,000, 300. He'd say, all of them. And then I was like, why is that funny to you, Dad? Why is that funny? And now as I look back, I'm like, I kind of get it now. The whole point is that no matter what you accomplish or achieve or acquire in this world, how many, there have been billions, trillions of people that have come before you that will come after you. None of it matters. And that can either be a really exciting thing, none of it matters, or it could be a really depressing thing, none of it matters.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's a huge part of it. If I actually thought that all of this stuff mattered, the achieving and the acquiring and the success, and if all of it mattered so deeply and so much, it'd be very hard for me to let go and simply breathe and enjoy the present moment. But I think that's been part of the gift and the blessing too, is just realizing that, we all got these soap operas, and most of the pain and the unhappiness we experience is not because of actually what happened. Whatever happened once. But it's the reliving it over and over ahead, or pre-living something in the future that feels, unhappy or whatnot. So it's very simple, I think, at the end of the day. Just too much thinking.
Yeah, just too much damn thinking.
Stop thinking so much.
Too much thinking.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier the psycho-cybernetics. So I think I actually just finished reading the latest edition. I can't remember what it's not narrated by the same, or read. I actually don't read. I listen predominantly. But the new psycho-cybernetics, I think. Yeah. And I found it to be incredibly interesting. That was a fascinating book. And for those who are not familiar, and please correct me if I'm butchering this, I was on a plane and sort of in and out of consciousness while I was listening to it. But what they're sort of trying to give you some tools, a tool set for sort of reprogramming your subconscious mind to some degree, right? So that things can sort of, the likelihood of things panning out the way that you want once you get into whatever the circumstance is that you're trying to prepare for. The more times you've practiced it, the better off you're going to be. And we see this all the time now in professional sports, certainly, and I think one of the best examples, you can always see Lindsey Vonn at the top of the giant slalom, and she's got her eyes closed and her head's bobbing back and forth, and she's visualizing this run, and they do it over and over and over and over and over. And then it just is like clockwork, your body's been there before. And so did I capture some of psycho-cybernetics?
Absolutely. Okay. You nailed it. I mean, and absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So with this busyness of the mind, right? And what we were just talking about, which I think is 100% correct. I mean, we're just constantly bombarding our brains, and at least my brain is a what if brain. I'm like, oh, and then what? And what if this? And then what? And what if blah, blah, blah? And I just run these scenarios, which helped me a lot in my previous career. It was part of the reason why I was good at that job, because you just kind of have to think about everything that could happen and, be prepared for that. But I'm wondering if in this like in the sense of the psycho-cybernetics world, where you are going to be fundamentally busying your mind further, but albeit consciously, if there's a difference in your view of this sort of conscious busyness, to an end, and if that's good all the time, or if you still want some absolute zero where you're just sort of letting things chill.
Great question. So yes, absolute zero where you just chill is way underrated, absolutely necessary. And so in my private practice, I see sort of like C-suite level executives, and I work with a lot of like athletes or entertainers, right? And so professional athletes, entertainers, actors, actresses, singers, whatnot. And they both, so even though the language might be a little different, we talk a lot about psychological state of flow. What's it like to be in the zone when you're Michael Jordan and you throw up, or Kobe Bryant, whoever, you throw up 61 points, right? What's it like to be, Jordan Spieth on, and how do you get into that psychological state of flow where you feel or you experience this effortless success where everything you put up just goes in, or every, time you throw the ball, it's a touchdown, whatever. Like, how do you get in that space where you're just feeling it? And and not only are you experiencing success and really this effortless success, but you're also really deeply joyful and blissful. What's it about? And it's about being incredibly present. Okay, you are incredibly present. There was a loss of time consciousness. There was a loss of self-consciousness. You're so deeply absorbed and consumed with the experience of what's happening in that moment that, and so the way in which you kind of create that more consistently in your life or your business or your sport or whatever it is, or your art, whatever you're doing, is by having challenges that are just slightly beyond your skill level. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole thing. Mike Cheek sent me hi from Claremont, actually, out here in LA. That's really his area of expertise. But the idea is that, yes, it requires incredible presence. So that being said, in that psychological state of flow, we're more productive, we're more efficient, we're more effective, we're more creative, all these incredible things. And it feels effortless. So whether you're executive, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, whether you're an athlete, whoever it is, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish and whoever it is you are, you can benefit so much more from a psychological and emotional and a professional, financial, relational way if you would spend more time quieting your mind, sitting in the silence, and letting this sort of deeper knowing, sometimes we call it intuition, but it's actually much smarter than it sounds. Like, intuition often sounds like just you feel something, and it's true or it's not true, but it's actually much more complex than that. But the idea, if you can rest your mind more consistently, okay, you'll be a much clearer, more effective, more efficient, more productive thinker and doer. Mm-hmm. And so without question, we often really, we really worship the ability to think and think often and think strategically. But a lot of the best strategic thinking and most creative thinking comes when your mind is rested. That's why Einstein, again, would say that his greatest ideas weren't discovered through rational thought. They were often discovered through imagination, or where he's in a bathtub. He was quiet, he was relaxed. And sometimes he wasn't even trying to figure out the problem, mm-hmm. or the answer to the problem.
Mm. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. I have this thing that I actually have had to train myself out of, and that would be when I go to lay down to go to sleep at night. There was this part of me that was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get to think. Like, I'm gonna get to just sit around and like let my thoughts just come in." And it was almost like, the same kind of feeling like if you're indulging on food or indulging on anything else. It's like this sense of like, "Ooh, I'm gonna just allow my thoughts to just like come in and do their thing, and I'm going to indulge in my thoughts." And I've had to really like train myself out of it because it keeps me up. It keeps me awake and stimulated. And I don't really get anything accomplished in that space. But I think it's interesting. We don't really realize how addicted we are to our thinking thoughts, and how we almost revel in indulging ourselves in them.
That's precisely right. So a lot of studies have found that we feel that we're accomplishing something when we're worrying, even when we're just worrying. Let's say we're just worrying or just remembering something from the past, that there's a sense within us that we're accomplishing something. We often feel more productive as a result of it, that somehow we've done something to make it right or make it better. And so, of course, that's simply not true in an objective way. But there is this sort of like psycho-emotional benefit that sometimes you get. Now, that being said, the downside way outweighs the upside and the small little hit you get in terms of worrying. So you're absolutely right, I think. And most of us don't realize that obsessive compulsive thinking that we do, and that indulgent thinking that you sort of so eloquently described there, that first of all, that sort of drains us of energy. But not only that, those thoughts are so redundant. It's like the same old thoughts over and over again, recycled 1,000 times. And I love recycling, but that's one area I don't want to recycle too much, right? It's like it's the same redundant negative thinking. And so, it's a really not a great use of time. Now, that being said, the flip side of that is, we want to be careful, because I remember early on thinking, man, my mind is driving me crazy. I'd call it my inner crackhead, like always wanting a fix. Like there's inner crackhead, he always needs a fix, like some new thing to worry about. And I remember literally having thoughts like, man, there's something I'm supposed to be worried about right now. What is it? And I remember having that moment and being like, am I serious? I remember having that thought and be like, yeah, like I'm seriously cracked out. So when I remember having that thought, and then later I did some research. And so your initial knee-jerk reaction when you're having thoughts you don't want to have is to kill them or delete them or like change them right away. And you want to be careful of that, because, you feed thoughts actually when you do that. So let's say you have this thought, like, I don't want to think that thought anymore. I don't want to worry about that anymore. And you say, I'm just going to stop thinking it, or I'm going to try to delete it, or I'm trying to change it right away. You actually feed the very thinking that you're trying to get rid of. And so instead, if you can just step back a little bit and just observe the thinking, as almost as though you're listening to it on a radio, or you're listening to it or watching it on a movie screen. If you can just kind of just step back a little and notice that you can observe or listen as sort of a silent, non-judgmental observer. That in of itself will create a little distance between you and the thoughts, and it'll give you just a little bit of an opportunity to not take those thoughts so seriously. And as you don't take them so seriously, then they start to come back less and less often. And so that in of itself can be helpful. The other thing is just a pattern interrupt. So when you're having really challenging thoughts, or you find yourself indulging in thoughts that aren't really making your life any better, but in fact are making you feel worse, one of the best things you can do is just focus on something positive. So find anything to focus on that feels better and put your attention there for a while.
Yeah.
Just grab onto that. Yeah, or some physical movement, It's like grab a couple of burpees.
Yeah.
Just about anything.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So this that's just such powerful advice, I think, for everyone. And I mean, especially the ruminators out there know. I mean, we had Guy Winch on not long ago, and he does such a great job of kind of describing the problem with ruminating. And up until that podcast, I was sort of kind of prided myself in my rumination. Like, through this for days on end, and I'm going to seek out every potential problem. Right. And so one of the pieces of advice that he gave for sort of breaking that cycle was to take action on something. And so we were talking specifically about like an actual problem, so if you're ruminating on a decision that is to be made, or, not just like you were saying, like, what was that thing I was going to worry about, like something where there's something to be done. And his suggestion was that if there's something to be done, then take the first step, like break the rumination cycle. Just take step one of whatever the thing is. And odds are that'll kind of break that up. And I'm wondering if there's, I think you kind of just probably answered this question. And now that I'm thinking about it, in that you just need a pattern interrupter. But I guess the question that I would have to tack onto that is like, what are some of your favorite ways of doing that? So if you can, I think you said, think a happy thought or find something that makes you happy. Like what? Yeah. Like top three.
Yeah. So it's a great question. Yeah. So that's great. And I would, you highlighting something really important, which is I would strongly encourage people, like when you're feeling neutral or positive, create a little list of healthy things you can do when you're not feeling so happy, So you've got to commit to it. You've got to, first of all, create that list when you're feeling in a slightly positive mood. Otherwise you can't come up with anything. Right. So, but also commit when you're in a good mood that when you feel unhappy, you're going to do one of those 10 things no matter what. Right. So on my list of things like happiness, sort of islands or touchstones, I would say top is exercise. So like you nailed it with the burpees. Like, so we know that 30 minutes of exercise is the equivalent to taking an antidepressant, right? It's that powerful. So that means, saying it the other way, is not exercising is the equivalent of taking a depressant every day, right? So exercise itself is huge for me. Reading like smarter, wiser, happier, more peaceful people's thoughts is absolutely critical for me. So like, especially when you're trying to go from not very happy to very happy, if you leave it up to, and if you leave it up to your friends and your family, you will not become, in most cases, any happier. Okay. So like, the world is not like, if you talk to most people, they're focused, they're very problem focused, they're very anxiety driven, and they're, very stressed out. So they're very gossip oriented. So, and that's fine. But if you leave it up to those folks to help you, find a happier life or you're going to be screwed. So you're better off drowning yourself in like podcasts like your guys, or books, or any kind of material you can find that's uplifting, that's inspiring, that teaches you something, or that just helps you makes you feel better, is critical. So music does that for me. And then reading, for some reason, I love just reading certain kinds of books, mostly spiritual or self-help books. Not too scientific, because if you're already in a kind of analytical mood, reading scientific stuff can kind of make you feel even more analytical. But yes, so I'd say those are the top two things. The beach, and then of course, I just love I call it practicing the presence. It's really meditation, but it's mostly just feeling that peaceful aliveness that's inside, like just being with that and just enjoying it for a little while. Those four things for me are just huge.
Yeah, I get that.
So on the kind of the opposite end of that spectrum, because we've been actually, Vanessa and I've been working with some a coach on a few things that we're dealing with, and she's having us make playlists. Like, okay, so you're going to put some thought and intention into this musical playlist, and then when you're feeling down or you're not feeling inspired or abundant, throw this playlist on. And what an amazing difference that makes. It's just like, oh yeah, these are my happy songs, like this, and it just instant, it's absolutely amazing. So on the flip side of that though, like, what are your thoughts about if you're being exposed to something, like you're in a decent mood, but then you're listening to talk radio, or there's it's Fox News or whatever news channel, it disturbs you. Because I feel this happen all the time. Like, everything just seems fine, and then you just get like song bombed, or just sort of like bombarded with some like negative, or at least from my perspective, perceived like negative tension that just winds me up. And I find myself like wanting to avoid it and just shut it off, and just like, it's almost like escapism is what it feels like. But I'm just like, God, I don't feel like I can buffer this right now, And so like, what are your thoughts on that? Is it escapism, and I should just get over whatever my problem is, and I should be able to buffer that kind of thing?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
He's looking across
I love it.
I don't know what he's talking about.
I totally hear you there. So it's okay. So here's the thing. Like, I used to consistently fall in the trap of either talking about something or listening to something or reading something because I felt like I should stay well informed. That was part of it. And that is a trap, okay? Because first of all, the problems in this world are endless. And secondly, you're feeling unhappy or worried or concerned does nothing for anybody at any point in time. And in fact, it makes you less charitable, less generous, and less loving. It also makes you harder to hang out with. Right. And if there's one thing we need in this world, we need people that are more peaceful, happy, and loving. So staying well informed at the cost of your happiness and peace and your love is really I would say a bad plan. It's a bad approach. Right. And so that was the first thing I had to realize. And the second part of that is like, you can't ever possibly stay informed about everything that's happening in the world. Neither should you. Right. So that was the first thing. So then the second thing is, I actually have increased my intolerance for like negativity overall. So now look, there are ways to share information that can be inspiring and helpful and kind, and there are ways to share information that aren't that. A lot of talk radio actually does a pretty good job of keeping it objective. That being said, still so many conversations and so many ways that people share information, it's just slanted in a negative way, and you do walk away and you feel worse for it. And it's so I would say that particularly in the beginning, when you're trying to ramp up this happiness thing, you want to increase your intolerance for negativity of any kind. When I first started, I literally was like, no more news, no more TV. Like I would watch movies now and then. I might watch a TV series, but I cut off my cable. I did all that stuff. I would stop digesting. And I was like, you know what? Every piece of information I need to know about what's going on in the world comes to me through my friends, even though I tell them I don't want to hear it. It still came to me. So I realized I was staying informed. You can't, but it's hard to stay uninformed.
Right.
So that being said, you just really want to be careful of that because it is a slippery slope. And at some point you do get to the place where you hear things that are negative and then you automatically begin to reinterpret them. So because I've been a coach for like almost 20 some years, I'm so used to people coming to me with problems all day, every day. All I do is I hear problems. And then my job as a coach is to meet them where they are, hear it, and then reinterpret it or reframe it in a way that's true, but that's helpful, inspiring, and kind, right? I want to help them see the opportunity where they only saw the problem, and then we can move forward accordingly. Well, you begin to do that with every conversation, with everything that you hear automatically once you begin practicing. But I wouldn't start there. I wouldn't make it about that in the beginning. Instead, just turn it off. Like if something doesn't make you feel good or if a conversation doesn't make you feel good, like turn it off.
Yeah.
You talking about resiliency, you must have an amazing resiliency. I mean, thinking about people coming to you essentially with problems a lot of times and you being able to switch the script, so to speak, and really change the way that information is landing for them so that it maybe is an opportunity. That takes something. That's really impressive. And I'm curious, how do you create that well of ability to give in that way?
I hide a lot. Like when I'm not with people, I hide. Yeah, like my friends are.
You'd have to have something that you could regenerate and restore your energy, I would think, really frequently for that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing probably something similar to, the way you guys operate. Like, when I'm on and when I'm with clients or when I'm, with people, I like to be fully present and I want to bring my best, the best energy, so to speak, that I can bring to the situation or the conversation or the session. And then when I'm done, I fully unplug. So I'm kind of like a completely on or off switch type of person. Doesn't mean sometimes I slide in both directions, but generally speaking, when I'm not working and I'm not, engaging people, I really will hide from, like I'm like in my apartment, like I'm listening to music, or I'm just like totally diving into my books, or I'm at the beach. But yeah, you have to. It's a great point that you make there. We're all kind of like batteries. You plug it in the wall, you recharge. That's you hiding away. And then you can take that fully charged battery out in the world and share it with people. The interesting thing is when you spend time with people that are happy and that are peaceful and that are loving, and they're not doing it for any other reason that it feels good to them to be that way. So they're not doing it with an expectation of reciprocity. It's mind-blowing because you can walk away from that conversation or that session and you feel stronger and more energized. And then you go into the next session, next conversation with even more energy, despite the fact that you didn't, quote unquote, plug yourself into the wall. But in a strange way, you did. And so that's the value and the beauty of really surrounding yourself with people that are inspiring, that are happy, that have good positive energy, that are peaceful, that are loving. It doesn't necessarily mean being in denial, it just means being able to digest and process life experiences in a way that lets you feel better off for them. Right. And so I guess that's my sort of answer is both surround yourself with people that are positive, inspiring, and happy and peaceful, that have good energy. And then when you can't do that consistently, or you're not able to do that, you've got to hide and spend time just recharging your own battery, plugging back into source, so to speak.
Well, you are certainly positive, happy, inspiring, loving, all those things you said. So it has been such a joy to be surrounded by your energy and to be in this conversation. And where can folks find you, Rob?
So first of all, thank you for that. I received that fully. You guys are the absolute perfect reflection of that. It's just incredible. You're such incredible conversationists. You ask such great questions, such great listeners, and you really have great energy. Just love that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Of course. So you can find me on all the social media platforms. It's Rob Mack Official, ROBMACK Official. You can also check out Good Morning LaLa, which streams live over Instagram and Apple TV, Focus TV, Roku TV. And you can find me on my website at coachrobmack.com.
Awesome.
Damn.
Well, continue the good fight, my friend, and we will hopefully see you. You're here in LA. We weren't able to do this in person, but I am positive we will be connecting in person soon.
Well, yeah, we want to have you guys on the show.
Yeah.
We're going to have you on Good Morning La La Land.
Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm in.
I mean, all things La La Land I'm into.
Well, I told you, delusion is a positive thing.
I'm just
Little delusion is helpful.
Just a little delusion. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. We'll see you soon.
And that's a wrap, folks. We hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as we did. And if you did,
Yes.
what can they do?
We haven't asked for a while, but if you did, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review and let us know that you're out there, you're listening, you're enjoying the show. And, we always love seeing those ratings flowing in, and we've been getting some somewhat regularly. So it's nice to see you guys are out there. You're making it happen. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we love that. And make sure you check out Good Morning La La Land and see if you can spot us on there.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
And I don't